Japan is a beautiful ancient country full of tradition, culture and great beauty that goes back thousands of years. But do you know what Japan also has? Weirdness. Which is exactly what I'm looking for, as I myself could be described as anything far from normal. So coming from a country full of technological advances, stunning art and some of the most creative minds that the world has ever seen, we have Vampire Clay. A movie about vampire clay. But before that, we have my collaboration with Makeship, as they're selling an exact replica of my face. If you want one of these plushies for yourself, there's still time remaining to get the project funded. If the project doesn't get funded, everyone who pledged gets a refund, but if it does get funded, you will get my face. The movie begins with an earthquake hitting Japan, due to Mother Nature finally deciding to do something about all of that weird tentacle content. Mother Nature didn't win this time, as all it managed to accomplish was creating a couple of cracks in the wall and making a little mess on the floor like a toddler with a temper tantrum. But due to not really being bothered to clean up that mess, Miss Aina, an art teacher who previously ran an art school in Tokyo before finding out her partner was cheating, is forced to relocate her classroom to a remote countryside workshop, as it's factually impossible for men to cheat in the countryside. Deciding that she really wants to know what that dirt looks like a few centimeters underground, Miss Aina digs a shallow hole before a mild earthquake hits because anime was a mistake, to reveal something in the ground. Dirt. And a bag containing old modelling clay because polluting the earth is fun. I hate that thing. Her students, Kaori, Riko, Aiko, Yuka and Kanji, arrive at her new classroom, and Kaori's forced to look for some spare modelling clay after the new student Yuka used hers because the idea of personal belongings is a made-up concept. While using the new dug-up clay to create the sculpture, it almost appears to breathe as she looks away because apparently it's shy. And later that night, while there's no one to be shy around, it begins to move some more as things start to get flaccid in here as a tentacle emerges from the bag to pick up a razor blade from the desk. A razor blade that Kaori accidentally slices herself with due to the sentient clay hating teenage girls and wanting them to bleed. She suspects Riko, her classroom rival, of doing it because Japanese teens are just built different. Don't like someone in Japan? Mutilate them. A man appears outside and comes across the dug-up hole in the ground and appears to be incredibly distressed due to his favourite patch of dirt being defiled before running away at the sight of education. That evening, Riko stays back at the classroom to catch up on some of her work and uses her newly found alone time to vandalise Kaori's art piece like the loving, wholesome friend that she is. And after staying behind the next day, because apparently she had so much fun the last night, she accidentally cuts her finger on a nail amongst the excitement of being a great friend, and it gets onto the clay. Always wanting to know what a teenage girl tastes like, suddenly the sculpture bites down onto her hand like some kind of weird pervert and begins making its way up her arm because the Japanese taste good. After taste testing this rather unusual culinary dish, a little clay mouse climbs out of the sculpture's ear and up Riko's dress to remind me that I am indeed watching a Japanese movie. That, or even me or the director forgot to take our medication. I can't quite tell. After it crawls into her mouth, she throws it across the room because screw the animals. And after holding the sculpture over a stove, it eventually lets go. She then crushes it, and Riko attempts to unlock her phone, but appears to be suffering from an unfortunate case of flaccid fingers. Her fingers have started bending, but wrong, before her hands are joined together by the sentient clay, as apparently it believes women belong in straitjackets. After smashing her own arm off because it felt kind of weird, her clay arm turns into a clay whale and entirely consumes her. And yes, that is a sentence I just said. The next day, the students find the mess, but don't find Riko, because apparently she's just inconsiderate like that. Enraged that she dare have to clean a mess up, Kaori takes her anger out on an inanimate piece of clay, except it isn't. It is animate. It's Riko when she can feel everything, as if Kaori's giving her a DIY facelift, except without all of the fun drugs. After Kaori's done showing the clay who's boss, we see pieces of Riko wriggling around inside of the clay, as all of her blood seeps out into it. And apparently this is what the clay needed in order to mimic her presence, as we see Yuka about to light a cigarette before Riko appears and attacks her because smoking kills. She then proceeds to lick the blood from her hand like some kind of strange mosquito, but Yuka, preferring her inside juices be left on the inside, gets some head. And by get some head, I mean she gets some of Riko's head as she pulls it off for herself. Yuka looks to see that there's something inside of Riko's face that very much should not be there. A grey Caucasian. After staring at the funny-looking white dude, Yuka then reappears and is about to attack Miss Aina, but fails on account of being terrible. The knife's knocked out of her hand by Kanji, who for some reason seems to be under the impression that she's bringing him a healthy home-cooked meal made with not clay and spit, only to take one bite and realise that it is very much made from clay and spit, like the big idiot that he is. After he spits it out in disgust, she slashes him in the face to remind him we live in a society, and while he's lying down on the ground, he's also down bad, as she then starts licking his wound in not the type of facial he was hoping for. And to almost satisfy his fantasy of being with two women at once, Yuka rips off her face to reveal Riko underneath, like some kind of strange sadistic Russian doll, except Japanese. So instead of getting to make one of those funny Japanese movies with all of the pixelation, they make death instead. Aiko then runs away from him as he approaches with a knife, as it's a good rule of thumb that if someone approaches you with a knife in one hand and no uncut cake in the other, you're about to become the cake. He then gives Aiko a hand as she's attempting to lock him out of a room, before slicing at her and latching onto the wound with a tentacle. Kanji then attacks an unsuspecting Kaori with a set square that's actually a triangle because its inventor didn't understand shapes. She slides it up his arm and into his face before he continues to use it as a weapon, with him now just being a really cute unicorn. But being more of a brony that generally dislikes women, he retaliates by trying to slice Miss Aina's face off before sticking his tongue out at her as if he's trying to taste the air. After being hit in the face by a psychotic lunchbox, Miss Aina then decapitates him by tackling him into a shelf, due to the little known fact of the Japanese secretly hiding samurai swords in them in case the white people attack. The clay then begins to emerge from his newly discovered neck hole, so Miss Aina and Kaori attempt to crush him with a wooden board, just like the fun medieval times. After my feet pics are leaked onto the internet, a face suddenly appears behind them, absolutely terrifying the women due to it being ugly. But suddenly the man from earlier with the extreme phobia of dirt holes appears, throws wood into its mouth before setting it on fire and crushing it back to dust. The man who we're going to name Exposition Dump then proceeds to dump exposition all over them as he tells them that this workshop used to be owned by a struggling artist with poor social skills, just like most of the people on DeviantArt. He started to become ill due to his work at a chemical factory where they used illegal materials, and before his death, created one final sculpture named Kakame and infused it with his own blood, like a very normal person. And after engaging in very normal people activities, he's ripped off by someone attempting to buy some of his work, which results in him passing away as the pair get into a scuffle. Unsure what to do about that weird looking dead dude and his weird looking creation, the man decides to burn them both because I guess he just couldn't be bothered. After the man is burnt to ashes and mixed with the clay, the accidental killer becomes an accidental drink spiller, which causes the powdered remains to bubble up and come alive. Thinking that he'd rather not have to look at that, he returns to his trusted method of setting things on fire before burying the dust nearby. And by bury the dust nearby, I mean he just kinda made a little hole in the ground and chucked it in there, because it's not really that important anyway. The killer, being the man with a severe phobia of dusty holes, who coincidentally wouldn't do very good at a nunnery, returns to the gravesite every so often to pay his respects, and to probably check that there isn't a killer Play-Doh demon around. And once they've finished cleaning up all of the mess, Kaori accidentally spills a drink, because apparently everyone around here does that, which causes the liquid to reach the forgotten piece of clay that Riko crushed earlier. We then see that she's been taken over by the clay and attacks Aiko, with the man wasting absolutely no time in setting this teenage girl on fire, as that's something he's always wanted to do. After he's finished having a little cry about it, another earthquake hits, as apparently Japan isn't very kind to dizzy people, causing a painting to fall from the wall and blow the dust directly into the man's nose and straight down into his lungs. After he's done huffing up teenage girls, Kakame is immediately born out of his stomach through an impromptu C-section, without him as much as even buying him a drink first. After he's done being all up in his guts on the first date, Kakame sneaks behind the girls and is about to kill Miss Aina before Aiko distracts it by offering her blood. His head suddenly grows larger than the average Redditor's, and just as he's about to eat her, the man, somehow still alive, manages to stab it, before somehow not being alive. Miss Aina impales it against a wall, and Aiko starts puncturing holes in its face for extra breathing assistance, before setting it on fire. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a massive shout out to a stop motion scene. With the entirety of the creature finally destroyed and turned into dust, Miss Aina decides to take it to the school she used to work at, because learning is for losers. After changing her mind about mercilessly murdering a bunch of people for literally no reason, they decide to take it back where they originally found it, because that worked so well the first time. And after they're done filling their tiny hole, years later, we see that it's dug up by someone fly tipping to be closer to nature, which causes the box to break open, giving the tree roots the ability to make their way inside, causing Kakame to be born again as a giant earthworm with all of his victims attached to him. Deciding that he'd rather just not with humanity, now controlling the literal Earth, the movie then comes to an end, with Kakame destroying the city. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons. The people who are greatly appreciated. As we all know by now, YouTube isn't exactly fond of the type of content I make. If you're interested in signing up to become a YouTube member or a patron yourself, you get your hands on some few cool perks like access to the Discord server, uncensored versions of all videos going forward, and a personal shout out at the end of the video. So that being said, starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to Anthony Clarté, Vincius Moraes, Jojo Ultra, Melchior Tabone, Shabab Hassani Bey, Rex, X2Ruby69, and Rob. And now moving over to this week's new Patreon signups, a big thank you to David Yunt, Poppy Bell, Ricky Gonzalez, Mike Van Dinfer, Renegade, The Hernster, Axayan, Captain Kunga, Oliver B, Mokta, Joe, Jacob, Big Will more like Big Goat in one word, Marvin Schmidt, Kathleen DePape, Isaac CG, and McGee993. So once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.